And the floor is yours.
All right. Okay. So, hello, everyone, and welcome. So today, let me just share my screen. Today, essentially, what I want to talk for a bit on is getting an A for authenticity, and what does that really mean? And I think a big part of this discussion, I think, is important because I remember for me as a counseling student struggling to figure out, okay, like I want to be like the ideal counselor and like this perfect counselor. And I'm learning all these things. I'm trying to get it right and get it the way they say to do it. But then sometimes there might be some techniques that are, okay, this doesn't quite fit my personality. So what do I do with it? Do I still force and try to do it, or do I just let it go? Or I see other counselors and I'm like, this isn't exactly how I am. You talk to other people in the field and the way that they think, the way that they act, you're like, this doesn't quite feel like who I am. So do you then question, am I really a counselor? Like, how do I make this profession work? There's also this idea that counselors are born and not made. And that's something I believe in. Like, I believe that counseling isn't just a profession that you jump into, that you clock in at 9 a.m. and you clock out at 5 p.m. I really, really believe that it comes from who you are. And we learn that who you are is the biggest and the best tool that you have to work with clients. So how do you ensure that you are true to yourself, true to your clients, and as well still be an effective counselor? So that is just basically what we want to start talking about today. And so I'm not sure how many of you have seen this before on social media, but there's this meme that says, the idea of what society thinks that I do, and you sit on the couch and the client is just talking to you, what your friends think you do, which is give free advice. Insurance companies have a different idea. Clients have a different idea. What you think you do, of course, because you think you are just this suave person, just, giving out all this psychological expertise. And then it boils on to what you actually do. And sometimes I think, particularly for counselors in training and for new professionals, how do you reconcile all of this? There's so many ideas about what a counselor is and who a counselor should be. And where do I fit into all of this? Where are my ideas about who I am? Are they in line with what a counselor is? Am I really a counselor? So I think these are all questions that we sit with. How do we get through solutions to these questions, or how do we come out with, how do we resonate with some of these ideas? And so a big part of why I think is important, some things that we need to consider with why the concept, or the conversation, I should say rather, about authenticity and about being true to yourself as a counselor is important, because there are a couple of things that we need to consider with the counseling profession itself. And so one of the main things about counseling as a profession that we need to own is the fact that counseling was initially developed by and for American dominant culture. And by American dominant culture, we basically mean male, white, heterosexual, cisgender, and non-disabled. So able-bodied. And even just that statement alone, how does that sit with you when you think particularly some of us might identify with some of these characteristics, but not all. And so, how do I sit with, I am entering a profession that essentially wasn't developed for me or developed by me, but I see the merit in it and I've invested time. I think this is really something that I want to do. So, what this tells me is that even the foundation, or the tools, the landscape of counseling itself wasn't really developed with me in mind. So how do I make a space for myself if I do not fit this identity and still be proud to identify as a professional counselor? So that is also that is one of the main things that we need to think about. And I think that many times we mightn't sit and really think about, what does a counselor professional identity mean and how much of it do I own and I embrace? But it is something that we need to think about if we want to enjoy longevity in this career or in this profession. The second thing that we need to consider is the fact that the history of counseling leadership is overwhelmingly male, and not just male, but white males as well. So actually, interesting point. So I think within the first 25 years, The ACA was essentially formed, which is, of course, like the landmark association associated with counseling in 1952. And it wasn't until 1975 with Thelma Daley. She was the first African American female president of the American Counseling Association. And she was the third female. So it means that in the history of it, a lot of the initial presidents were white men. And increasingly now, there are increasingly female in leadership positions within the ACA. Interesting to note, so in 1975 was when Thelma Daley was the first African-American female. It wasn't until 1993 that the second African-American president was elected. And so over the course of the history, and so I was just highlighting these two facts because those stood out. But in terms of female, and particularly counseling now, when you look at practitioners, it is dominated by women. And yet, how much of the direction of the profession is led and determined by men, and by white men in particular as well. And I am not saying this as, oh, it's horrible, burn it down. But what I am saying is these are things that we need to be aware of. And what are the implications for somebody who might not identify with the leadership? Because if I am a counselor, but I don't see myself in leadership, do I aspire to leadership? Do I think that there's a seat at the table for me? Do I have views that I think that should be expressed? And do I have insights that I think could be impactful? But if I don't see leadership reflective of who I am, then how does that affect how much I identify with counseling as a profession? The last point I think that's important for us to consider when we think about authenticity in counseling is the fact that the clients that are coming to counseling are increasingly diverse. And why this is important is because, so we mentioned that initially counseling was developed by and for American dominant culture. But today, where society is so diverse and the counseling is reaching clients of various backgrounds and ethnicities, one of the conversations that you find, particularly with minoritized groups, there has been a reluctance to seek mental health services because it didn't appear that it was for them. And also as well, there's a sense of mistrust when you see providers that don't look like you. And so it is important that clients see providers who look like them, and it will encourage them to seek some of these services that are so important. So for all these reasons, we do need to consider the fact that being authentic and being who you are, truly you, is important in terms of what you bring to the counseling profession. So you might think, what does all of this mean for me then? Little old me. And so like I think there's such like a big impact as this, when I think about one, whether we consciously consider it or not, who we see around us and who we see in leadership, in the profession, in the career path that we choose, it does impact how we see ourselves and the extent to which we identify with the profession. And so I think about, as a counseling student, when you would have thought about, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to help people, and I have these ideas about what it means to be a counselor. And then semester one in grad school hit. And you probably did like PD, professional development, or a theories course, and you realize, oh my goodness, so this is not what I thought it was going to be. And you say, okay, maybe this was just the first semester. And then the second semester hits, it's like, oh my God, it gets worse. This is just nothing like what I thought this was going to be. I thought, like I said, going back to the meme, I just want to talk to people and help everyone and just bring about world peace and end hunger. That a lot of times, those are the ideas that we come into counseling with. And then we realize that we are no longer in Kansas. So what do we do then? What does that mean? When I've chosen a profession I'm really passionate about and I want to do it, but I am not sure if I really fit in it. Because a lot of times the theories that we learn about, not so much reflective of me and my community and where I come from. The theorists that we learn about, not exactly, I do identify with them, or some of the ideas that they have as well. And so a lot of times there is this mismatch. And so in addition to that, we also learn about professional dispositions and what it means to be a counselor, what that looks like. But at the same point, we need to think about how do I fit in this idea and in this grand picture and in this grand scheme? Because if it is that I don't show up to be in a council with my full self, then what am I really doing with clients? And a lot of times, and I know that students love role plays. I personally hate role plays, but it is a necessary evil that we can't get away from. But when we think about role play exercises, is that what we do with clients? And if it is that we approach counseling and we approach it as, hey, okay, I have to do this, and we learn all these skills, and I have to insert a technique here and practice reflective listening here and sprinkle it with a couple of and how do you feel about that? And it really just like, what does that really do for the clients? Are we really helping clients to initiate the changes that they want? Research has consistently shown that the most important thing in counseling and in therapy, the most powerful tool is the relationship. And being in a relationship, a real relationship that fosters growth, and this might be where my Rogerian influence comes in, but you have to show up in terms of you being real and congruent and authentic. Yeah. So if you are not showing up with your full authentic self, then what are we essentially doing with clients? So I guess, and at this point, everybody's still with me, right? I want to make sure that I do not speed up, and because I know the accent as well. So I want to make sure that everybody's still with me and understand it. So when we talk about showing up with your full self, why would I want to do that? I think when we show up with exactly who we are with clients and sit with that, I think that is the breeding ground for a genuine connection with clients, which is what has been shown to be the most helpful aspect of therapy. That connection that we make with a client that is just true and genuine and real. But how can we foster that relationship if we aren't fully showing up as ourselves? And you might think, well, nobody might really know. I firmly believe that on some level, clients could tell when something is a bit off. And so I think a lot of aspects about therapy, we might not be able to fully explain why a connection is made, and clients will tell you, I don't understand what is so different, but something about this relationship, this rapport that we have, it works and it makes me want to be a better person. And of course, various theories put different language to it. But essentially what it means at the core of it is, how do I show up with my full self and allow my client to also do the same? And we coexist in this space. Yeah. And so that is what we're essentially working towards. And so you as a student counselor, as an emergent counselor, how do I do that in this entire process where I am still learning about who I am? I'm learning about what it means to be in this profession. How do I exactly do that? So before we talk about how we exactly get that done, I do want to highlight some of the benefits of being authentic. So a couple of perks of when you show up with your clients or to meet your clients with your full self. What that looks like, or the benefits of it in your work, is that when you are unapologetically you, I believe it frees your client to also unapologetically be themselves. So many times we ask clients, and I always think it's interesting when we think about what we demand of clients in session. You expect this person to come in and just fully open up to you and just share, like their deepest fears, things they might not have told anyone else. And no, it doesn't mean that we have to reciprocate and share secrets, but we at least need to be fully honest and transparent with our clients. And I think that when we model for them what it means to be unapologetically yourself, it allows them to do the same. And that ties into the other benefit, because I think what that does is me being my full self and allowing you to do the same, it allows clients to see that I do not have to, me being fully who I am doesn't have to impose on you being who you are. We could coexist in our full unapologetic, we could coexist with our full self side by side simultaneously. And that models that I shouldn't diminish who I am to allow you to be who you are. And I also wouldn't expect you to diminish who you are to be who I am, or to allow me to be who I am. So it shows clients the fact that, because many times, and again, I will apologize for my Rogerian influence coming out, but just in terms of clients have learned that they need to do X, Y, and Z to be accepted. So they've already had all of these ideas about conditions of worth that are ingrained in them. And how can we free them from that and just allow them to be you? I think therapy is such like a wonderful exploration of who an individual is. Many times they come in thinking they know, but in the space that we create for them, they discover, wow, I didn't know that this was who I could be. And that is one of the magical things like about that space. But that can only be accomplished when we truly show up as ourselves and allow our clients to do the same. By doing that, we give them permission to also be authentic. And the last part, I think, of what it does, it also humanizes counselors. There's something beautiful about recognizing that you as a counselor also make mistakes sometimes, and that you are only human. And why I think this is important and is liberating for clients, but also for counselors as well. We come into this profession sometimes with the idea that I need to do this, 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 and I want to be, and it's great that we aspire to be great counselors. We could aspire to be great counselors. I think it might be a mistake, not might be, it is, to aspire to be a perfect counselor, because a perfect counselor doesn't exist. I've met professionals who've been in this field for 20 and 30 years, and they still be like, oops, I probably shouldn't have done that. You hear like the greats like Yalom talk, and he's like, oh, they reflect on even some missteps that they might have made with clients, or maybe some things that they think, maybe I would have done this differently. But allowing a space for authenticity, accepting that, hey, I'm only human and sometimes I might make missteps. I think that's such a wonderful thing and could be liberating for you as a counselor, but also for your clients as well. Some of the other benefits when it comes to being authentic, I think professionally, there is this idea that, and I know people say this a lot, which I'm not sure I believe, but we'll go with it. If you truly love what you do, you'll never have to work a day in your life. I don't believe that. I believe I'll still have to work. I'll just enjoy the work a lot more, because it's all work. And I think when we think about when I show up to sessions as myself and I'm bringing me, yes, it will sometimes take a lot out of you. But think about how much more effort would be required to put on a facade and show up for session after session after session. It's just, think about if who you are, just flows naturally in session, then that also decelerates the rate with which burnout might occur. Because it doesn't feel like I have to muster myself and be something that I'm not. I could sit and really just be 100% in the moment, how I feel with my clients. Of course, with some boundaries. But doing that is so second nature, or it should be so second nature to you, that I think it definitely reduces how much of a load we sometimes feel like counseling is. One of the greatest gifts I always remember from when I was a master's intern, my first supervisor, I remember one of the greatest gifts, and I told her this, I learned from her, is that you could tell counselors who embody like the profession and aren't just people who do this as a job. Because sometimes in regular conversations, it just like they will naturally, all of the characteristics just ooze out of them. And so when you are like that, when you get to that point, it means then that who you are, it has been reconciled with what your ideas about this profession is. And so essentially, it doesn't take work to muster yourself up to be a counselor. It just flows naturally. And you exist in this space that allows all of your interactions, many of them will be therapeutic, but it flows so naturally from you. And that is also one of the things that I think we should aspire to. Okay, so before we go further into talking about, well, how do I nurture this sense of authenticity in me? Are there any questions or concerns? All right, so keep going. All right. Okay. So, okay. So we've spoken about essentially how do I show up and be fully authentic as a person, as a counselor. I think there are certain steps that are involved with this. And one is an understanding of who am I. And a lot of times we think um, counseling, oh, I come to grad school to learn what it means to be a counselor. And I think a lot of counseling students get that idea half right. In classes, we learn about theories, we learn about interventions, we learn about techniques. And as much as we hate when they ask us to journal about our experiences, or oh my God, discuss what did I learn from this? How did I grow? But being a counselor requires a lot of introspection because you bring yourself to work with clients. So an understanding of who exactly you are, that is important. And I think the beginning stages of being authentic. And this is required by everyone. Do I really understand who I am? And of course, I should say that this understanding, this definition of who we are changes over time and it evolves. But at any given time, am I aware of who I am and what I bring to the table, who I show up as when I show up, not just a session, but when I show up in life? The second question after I understand who I am is asking, how do I feel about who I am? Am I okay with these are the qualities and the characteristics that I possess, and this is how I show up? Am I okay with that? Do I feel happy? Do I feel sad about this? Are these things that I'm proud of, things that I'm not so proud of? And then the last part of it is, do I accept who I am? And so one of the things about self-acceptance, people tend to think, oh, are you just going to accept all of your bad ways? It doesn't mean thinking that you're perfect, but it means that I have this phrase that I have accepted that I love me for who I am, the good, the bad, and the ugly. A lot of times we just want to present the good, but there are some bad sides of me and there are definitely some ugly sides, which I will not share. And we all have them. I always say there are things that when we think about um, the Johari window, aspects that we know, aspects that other people see, but even taking that one step further, I think there are some things that I share with people, some things that you have no problem with the entire world knowing about you. Some things are reserved for close friends, and some things are reserved for you and your Lord. Because you just kind of it's just some things that you are just, nope, nope, nope. Whoever your higher power is or the universe, that entity and I are the only two who would know about this aspect of myself. And that is okay though. It doesn't mean accepting who you are doesn't mean that you are this perfect person or all good. It just means that I've accepted that I'm a work in progress. I've accepted that there are aspects of me that are not too cute. And you know what? That is okay because this is what I'm working with. I want to borrow a phrase from RuPaul. If anybody is a RuPaul's Drag Race fan, RuPaul says, if you don't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? Can I get an amen? Well, something to that effect, right? But essentially, and so we think about to be fully authentic, it means then that I have accepted who I am. Many times I think when we think about being authentic and showing up exactly as we are, what prevents us from doing that is because we're afraid that, oh, what are the repercussions? Will I be rejected if I show up in this particular way? What if people feel a particular way about me? How is that going to impact me? But when I come from a place of I've accepted who I am, good, the bad, and the ugly, and I'm not deluding myself into thinking that it's all roses and ice cream. I don't know how those two came together, but it just popped up. Then to me, when I've accepted that, like my flaws, or I should say my limitations, my shortcomings, then that is okay because when other people bring that up to me, I can then say, really, is that the best you have? I'm aware of this, I'm working on it. It empowers you to be able to own that. And so I think getting to that point is what will go a long way in helping us to really show up and be authentic with clients and in session. 2 points that I think are important for us to consider when we think about being authentic and showing up in an authentic space with our clients and even with people in general is one, radical self-acceptance. I accept me for all that I am and all of who I am, even when the world might not, or certain groups of people might not. That is okay. I accept me. And this sounds wonderful in theory, but this is an ongoing work that we commit to every day. Because every day as we learn about me, learn about ourselves, let's just say, as I learn about me, I might discover things that are not that pretty, but I've accepted them and I've accepted that I am working on something. So continually working to radically accept myself so that it liberates me from hiding aspects of myself because I want the acceptance of others. So I am okay to show up as who I am because I am not seeking validation from others when I show up in a space. The second part of that is the fact that the only constant is change. So authenticity, what that looks like today, will look different next week. I am fully being authentic and myself right now. This that I am right now will change maybe tomorrow, in a few weeks, based on experiences. And all I can do is, in that moment, commit to being true and showing up as I am, all of who I am, and being fully present. And basically, that is, I think, what the core of authenticity is. So essentially, what we're looking at is how can I make peace with all that I am, all of the aspects of my identity, and reconcile that with who a counselor is, and show up to sessions. And so part of that is starting to work on ourselves, radically accepting ourselves in all of what and who we are. And also as well, I think the second step is, as we learn more about counseling, as we learn more about the profession, how do I tweak and adapt the theories that we learn about, the techniques and the interventions, and put my own spin on it? Or as some people might say, put my own stank on it, my version of doing things. So that within, of course, ethical boundaries, there is so much room for us as counselors to be creative and to fully be ourselves. And that would then allow us to free our clients to also be themselves with us. Yeah. All right. So this is the point where I drop the mic and I say thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Okay. So that is more or less the formal part of what I wanted to say. So what I want to do now is, if we can open up the floor for feedback, questions, what might have resonated with you, or how can we continue this discussion about being authentic as a counselor? How can I fully be a counselor as well as at the same time fully be me?
This was really good. How do you learn authenticity? Is it something you learn, or is it just?
Oh, is it? And that's a good question. So I think I will share my views, and then of course we could open the floor for other people and what they think. I think it isn't. I think when we think about something that we learn, it makes it seem as something we put on. I see authenticity as a way of being. And so rather than as something that we learn, I think it is something that we nurture. We nurture an approach or a way of being that comes closer and closer and closer to what being our full true selves would look like. I don't think it's for like a destination, but we're continually striving to be more and more of ourselves, if that makes sense.
It does.
I guess since there's not many of us, I will add that I think when I started practicing, I felt such anxiety about what you're supposed to do and how it's supposed to go, even though, of course, I had gone through practicum and internship. But I just really didn't want to mess up. But then over years of having so many clients, I realized exactly what Bren was saying, which is that it's exhausting to try to be someone that you're not. So I started to use some of I guess you'd say my humor. I don't know. I'm not that funny, but I would just like start to use little things to make clients feel more comfortable, or I would dress in a way that I felt like worked for me. And it was okay because I worked at a very casual agency. So I just kind of started to settle into that. And now I feel like I can practice being exactly who I am, but I kind of had to nurture it a little bit more just because of that starter anxiety, I guess I would say. So probably some of you will have that too.
And that's so true. Like I said, like we have these ideas about what being, and I think it doesn't help that for so many of the courses initially, we come from an academic background, and many people see counseling training as, oh my God, like I have to get this grade. And so if I don't get if I don't hit these points, then I wouldn't get an A, and so related to GPA. When I think being trained as a counselor is so much more about the experience and what you learn from it. And so if we're so focused on like the academic side of things and the grades, then that journey aspect is kind of lost. And so we're so driven to being perfect and hitting all of these points. And we miss the fact that a big part of it is just being and just naturally letting it flow. Um, and so why I think also as well this is important is because I think when we look at our profession now, there's increasing diversity in the student counselors. I think it's important for people who are pursuing graduate education who you might come from identities or communities where you didn't think this was possible, and you might look at the faculty and you're like, oh, they don't look like me, because maybe where you might come from a small town and where I come from, maybe this isn't things that people dream about. And so I believe you've spent so much time. Most of us would enter grad school. A lot of us, you've already spent at least 20 years of your life nurturing and developing a particular personality, a particular way of thinking. Do I just throw that out the door to become a counselor? Or do I set it aside every time I put on like my therapist hat, and I have to be serious and this particular way? And it is counterproductive, I think. How can we give people hope and allow them to really be themselves? And I think a lot of times we talk about multiculturalism and allowing clients and recognizing, being culturally sensitive to clients. But I think, do we also apply these rules to ourselves? We say that we want to create an atmosphere where clients are free to bring all of who they are, but are you modeling showing up in your full self for clients to be able to do that as well?
When I really think like that our clients might, so I'm thinking like, what happens if you are your true self and you get met with criticism? Then you retreat, and you're less likely to do that. Like if you make a joke or something, like Dr. Dalton was saying, and your supervisor or someone says, well, that's something, and then it's and our clients might be experiencing that too. They want to try to be their authentic true selves, and society is putting them in their place and criticizing them when they try to do that. So we can model that, or try to model that.
But for us to model that, we first have to experience it and we have to experience it in ourselves. Because a lot of you mentioned clients might be afraid to, if I make this joke, I'm afraid of being rejected by my therapist. And funny enough, many of us as counselors are afraid of being rejected by clients. Because we think, if I don't say this just right, they might not come back. And then what does that say about me? We're so afraid that if I don't do all of these things correct, then this client might decide to terminate services with me, and is just going to look, oh, what does that mean about me? Am I a bad therapist? But how can we free ourselves of all of those, these expectations, and looking for validation from others? Just how can we expect clients to be liberated from that if we haven't liberated ourselves from those ideas?
I have a question.
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead. Yes, please go.
I had myself on mute because someone kept honking their car horn and like they wouldn't stop. So sorry. Um, I wanted to ask you because I am starting practicum soon, and in terms of like where I'll be working within like a college setting with community college students, but then we kind of have to like, I guess, find our own clients, so to speak, because it'll be like within a veteran resource center. And I'm just wondering, like, in terms of authenticity, how, like, I guess, what would your advice be to like remain authentic and myself and still like maintain specific boundaries because I'll be working with like the veteran population? You're on mute. Sorry, Brett.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so what I'm hearing your question is, how do I show up in this environment that's a bit different to who I am and still be true to me? Right, Justina?
Yes.
Okay. And so when at least I should say me, when we talk about being authentic, I don't think it means that you have to do everything that you like or just in a way that, okay, these interventions are like, I'm gonna do this. I think you still show up to that space and you do what would be required of you, but in your own way and in your style that might reach clients. And when you say you have to, I guess it's kind of interesting because you have to recruit like your own clients. That is a bit tricky to navigate. But what I believe that um, what people oftentimes are drawn to, even if they might not they might not quite be into what you are into, but people will be drawn to your passion for what you do. A lot of times people be like, you know what, I don't like this, but she or he is so committed to this. I'm like, you know what, there's something in that. I think when that goes through, I think that is what will reach people, because I do believe we live in a world where people are searching for genuine connections or people or realness, I should say, and people respond to that in ways that might be surprising, because I think many people are searching for that space to just be who they are, or even just to be liberated from expectations of who they should be and what they should be. And when they see others doing it, people tend to have one or two reactions a lot of times. They either resent it because they're like, how dare you be so fully yourself? When that is because they aren't allowing themselves to do that, or they gravitated so much to learn how to do that as well. And so like I feel like even in this setting, you whatever approaches, whatever techniques, whatever programs you might have to run, put your own spin on it, and you would see how that would attract people and people would be drawn to it. I guess that is I don't know if Dr. Dalton has, I'm going to put her on the spot, and what other feedback she has.
I liked the statement about you have to do what is expected, right? First of all, our code of ethics, but then what's expected at your site. But there's lots of ways you can throw your personality into it, whether it's just how you go through the paperwork and get them signed up, or it's your humor, or it's how you talk about your own life in appropriate ways in the sessions. That's how you bring yourself to it. So I've had lots of clients who maybe didn't agree with things that I was saying professionally, because, clients sometimes don't want to hear that point of view. But because we had set up such a nice therapeutic rapport and they felt like they could trust me, they might say, like, that's really annoying me right now, but I'm going to think about it, that kind of thing. And so then you can be effective. So I would just challenge you to learn the rules, first of all. And then as you know the expectations and the rules, throw yourself in little bits at a time in appropriate ways and just see how it is received by your clients. And I bet it will be helpful to the process. Definitely.
This is like a supervision session. Am I the only one who thinks that, Jen? I was like, whoa.
No, I was just thinking the same thing, actually. Yeah, because I was thinking actually like, so recently in my supervision sessions with my supervisor at practicum, I would be like giving my thoughts about the client. Like, I actually think this is going on. And my supervisor would say, did you say that to them? Like, you're not, say that to them. That's being authentic. Don't come in here and say this. You know, say it there. Share authentically what you think without, making the clients feel blamed or rupturing the therapeutic alliance.
Because like I think that frees them to also share how they feel as well. Like Dr. Dalton mentioned, clients like, you know what, this really annoys me right now, but I'll think about it. Like, just that is liberating, because how many times in the outside world, clients are forced to hold their tongue and pretend to go along because of social graces. And I think if you can't do that, if you can't just fully be free within like this session that's supposed to be all about you, that you are paying for, maybe through insurance, but you're paying for this, then where else? This may be the only opportunity where clients get to fully just be. And as I say it out loud, I'm realizing we expect clients to just come and show up and be, when how can we expect that from them if we aren't doing the same?
I would also say that in appropriate ways that helps the client work on what they want to work on, we have to be ready to disclose stuff about us if it is appropriate. So, I work with primarily LGBTQ clients, and so they want to know about my own life. They want to know about my family. They want to know about coming out. And, it's not about me. It's not my own therapy. I've done that work. But you have to be able to provide that in appropriate ways and be so authentic. Because if we can show up in that way, then they come back months later and say that they've been thinking about it, and it's something that totally has left my mind, but that's kind of the ways that I find showing up and being authentic, is being ready to disclose in appropriate ways.
And that could be so powerful. And when we talk about like self-disclosure, not just in terms of details about your life, but as Jennifer was mentioning, how do you feel in the moment? That is also a form of disclosure as well. And being real and authentic in that moment. You know what? This is how I feel right now. And so, of course, within reason, and having it be therapeutic and not just be because you feel frustrated with a client. But I think there is something that is so rich about showing clients that I could disagree with what you were saying and we could still coexist. In a world that doesn't seem to be, yes, we talk about tolerance, but as some people say, I don't want to be tolerated. I don't want to be in a space where I'm tolerated. So how can we really model for clients and have them experience what it's like to just be fully, and we say that, right? Unconditional, positive regard, if you're a Rogerian. And we talk about all these things, but what does that really look like? And that is so effective and powerful. One of the things that I wanted to add that might help us with this, I think part of nurturing authenticity also means that we sometimes need to experience that that type of unconditional positive regard from our support network. And that could be from a friend, from a partner, it could also be from a therapist. But I think in the same way that that acceptance liberates clients to explore themselves, we also need some of that. And so to maintain, because I think to maintain that ability to be fully yourself and not be boggled by the need for validation or acceptance from other people, that usually comes when I think we need to also have like some type of secure base or some type of a strong support network that you could rely on. I think that definitely helps with building your ability to show up as your full self in whatever space you are.
So how, like, I think one of the biggest things that counselors in training and like newly licensed counselors struggle with is authenticity and also being sensitive to feedback. I'm not so like sensitive to feedback with myself, but I think in a way like I don't want to offend other people because as a counselor, you know, our job is to kind of like tell the client something that they don't want to hear, sort of like what Dr. Dalton was saying, but then like you have to do it in such a way that they won't take it offensively. But I guess what I struggle with is like, how do you know if they're going to take it the wrong way? If that's even possible to know that.
I think that's a good question because you're like, how, one, I think if we create the type of space that is comfortable for them to be able to share that as well, you know, if we nurture that type of environment where, hey, this is just you and me here, you could be fully open with me and I with you. So I think that's one of the ways by nurturing that. Second, we could also just ask them like, how do you feel about like what I might have said? And I think what we could do is if we set up the type of environment where feedback isn't criticism. And so I accept that you could tell me how I have made you feel or how you feel based on what I said, but that doesn't necessarily mean that what I said was wrong. What I did was wrong. Does that make sense? So even in terms of how do we set up that type of relationship with clients where you do not have to be offended by feedback, or even feedback isn't meant to be like this jab at you necessarily, as it might be maybe in other environments and other spheres, but it's a continual dialogue. Seeing feedback as a dialogue rather than a criticism. Does that work? Just
That makes sense.
uh-huh.
You were kind of like, is she lost? No, that makes a lot of sense. It was so funny because like when you were saying that, I really kind of thought back to my Res 2 experience and group. So I don't know why that popped up in my head.
Okay. I okay. We will leave Res 2 and group alone.
I would say another thing is that you just want to really make sure that you understand the vibe of your client. Like you can see a lot of clients just want you to be a little more engaged or relaxed or whatever. And then some clients are super formal. They want to get to business. They've got an outline of what they want to say. And there's really no space for that. So you want to be yourself and your authentic self. But I feel like, at least in my experience, sometimes you need to adjust how much you are going to put out there, you know, because it's always to the benefit of the client. And if something that is your natural style is not to their benefit, then you got to hold off, you know. So I think that all of us are really good at reading people, though. So you'll get a hang for that once you are practicing, you know, and practicing.
Yeah, I was thinking like there's so many different layers to ourselves. There's, you know, there's like 12 me's that are the real me. There's me that's real when it's just maybe me and Justina talking as friends. And then there's me that's more professional talking with instructors, or me with a 12-year-old client having fun. It's all different, but it's still me. I'm still being authentic. So you might have to just modify that and be mindful of who you're with.
Or highlight different aspects of yourself. That's the way of putting it. Like I think we're so multidimensional, and some people are like, okay, you know what, this aspect of me might be more appropriate in this setting, or even simply turn. If we want to take it like models, find your light. For each session, think about what is my best angle in this particular interaction, and finding that and adjusting to suit.
Well, I think this is a super good topic, and I would encourage everyone, you know, as you're doing your clinical work, to talk to your supervisors about it and, if you feel like you've done something that didn't land well with a client, follow up on it next session. You know, you always can do that. It was crazy working with the Res 1 students, how much anxiety I forgot about, I guess, and really could see it all in them. And it reminded me of exactly who I was at that time. So there's no right and wrong. It's just kind of your natural way of how you go about things. And it's okay to revisit them the next session or later in the session. And so Brent's thought of like, hey, how did that feedback go for you is totally fine. But I would just encourage you to keep working on it in supervision.
I'm going to stop recording now.